Hi, this is Pat McDonald, your host for Vote for Vermont, where our tagline is Listening Beyond the Soundbites. Joining me by Zoom is Chief Don Stevens, who is the chief of the Nulhegan Band of the Coosac Abenaki Nation. Don, welcome again to the show.
Thank you, Pat.
Yeah.
Appreciate being here and speaking with
Well,
you today.
we've got some serious stuff to talk about. Don's been on my show both in the radio and TV several times, and I always enjoy having him on. Maybe not so much this time because the Abenaki here in Vermont are dealing with some challenges to their recognition by Vermont, and we're going to talk about that. And it's by the Abenaki leaders in how do the Canadian, what is the Canadian tribe, Don? The Odanak?
Odanak and Wolanak, yeah,
Right.
the Canadian tribes.
Yeah, and they are challenging the authenticity of the Abenaki here in Vermont, even though we have done many things to support the Abenaki here and to recognize who they are and what they have contributed to Vermont. So, Don, can you talk a little bit about yourself and about the tribes, and let's go from there.
Sure. I mean, obviously, going back to things. I mean, we've had family feuds since the 1700s, right? I
Right,
mean,
sure.
and it's unfortunate that Europeans try to get involved with trying to figure out in between two tribes that are in disagreement. But when it comes to us, we've been here for throughout time, millennia. I mean, it started with us being recognized as Indian, and then we moved into Indian gypsies. They called us gypsies who traveled around, and then we came together from family bands into tribes to work with the European government. And Nulhegan is one of the largest tribes. We're more up in the Northeast Kingdom, and Missisquoi is in northwestern Vermont, which is also one of the largest tribes. And then there's one in Orange County, the Coassuck of the Coas, and then El Nu, which is in Brattleboro. They're the smallest tribe. But we've been here. We even had missions in Vermont before they were up in Canada for Odanak. Mission de Loops, which was on the Connecticut River, and also the mission at Missisquoi. We got recognized in 2011.
Mm-hmm.
And El Nu and Nulhegan got recognized in 2011, and then the Coassuck and the Missisquoi tribe got recognized in 2012. So recognition, the process was created in 2010, and then we got recognized the following year, and then after that, the Missisquoi and Coassuck.
Now, this was state recognition, not federal recognition, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
We don't have federal recognition in the way that you would look at when it comes to programs and services that have special benefits as a recognized tribe. But we do have legal agreements with the Department of Interior to carry eagle feathers. So we have signed those legal agreements as Abenaki tribes and me as chief.
Yeah.
So we have some sort of acknowledgement from the federal government,
That's great.
but not recognition that you would think of with
Well,
other.
I was reading that the process is very costly to go through, but it's also very extensive. It could go on for quite a while, correct?
Yeah, I think when Missisquoi started, they filed in the 70s or 80s, and that didn't come up until middle 2000s, like
Wow.
2005 or so. Now, there's three ways to get recognized federally in the United States. There's through Congress, like the Lumbee that you see on TV, where the president said, recognize the Lumbee tribe and the Virginia tribes. And then there's the BIA process, which is the lengthy one, the 20 years, $20 million kind of process. And then there's the through federal court, where like the Penobscots did, where they went for land claim and they got recognized, but they don't have all the full benefits of a federally recognized tribe. So they got it through their land claim. And that's what Odanak is attempting to do here. That's the biggest issue of why we feel they're attacking us.
Because of the land?
Yeah, they're
So-
trying to get recognized in the United States, and they have been pretty clear through 1997, 98. They explored land claims in Vermont, to see how feasible it was.
Oh,
And then there was they in 2018, I believe, Rick Obamswin, the chief, had mentioned that he was interested still in doing land claims as soon as their land claims were exhausted in Canada. And then in the 22 symposium at UVM, Daniel Nollet, their general manager, also mentioned that they were going to start focusing on Vermont. And I think that's kind of where the push is, and I think that's what they're trying to do, but we kind of stand in their way.
are people from UVM and other places, do they recognize what it's all about? That it's about land?
I,
Uh,
I I think they kind of do, but they have their own agenda, and they, I can't speak for them, but it's very shameful that, this would happen. I mean, the
right.
professors that are at UVM right now, including Rep Hedrick, who also works at UVM. So everything is focused through UVM. Those
Ah,
professors, David Massell, Richard Whiting, Troy Hendrick, they're all UVM employees. And,
ah,
they're involved with Odanak. David Massell is actually he does Indian studies and French studies, so he has a relationship with Odanak,
yeah.
and his specialty is hydroelectricity as well. And when this started in 2022, Hydro Quebec bought 12 electric plants down here on the Connecticut, and this started in 2022.
Hmm.
And they were also invited to the symposium at UVM. So it's all connected. It's all
Yeah.
tied in.
And that was pretty contentious, wasn't it? The UVM symposium, what I read. It,
Well, it was contentious in the fact that it's a one-way discussion.
right,
So they're inviting them down here using their PR firms to spread their message to try to remove our ethnicity. So that way, if they did take Vermont to federal court, of course, Vermont would say this is Abenaki territory, but it's Vermont Abenaki. And so we kind of stand in their way. If they could get rid of us, then if they filed the lawsuit in federal court, the state have already acknowledged this is Abenaki land, and they wouldn't have a lot of. It would be hard for them to defend that.
right.
So we're kind of in their way, and I think that's the big push of why they want to get rid of us, because they want reparations, as they've mentioned,
And
and
I,
they want
I
recognition.
just want people to know what's happened here in the state. First of all, you were recognized, but also the first week in May is Abenaki Recognition and Heritage Week, and there's proclamations written from the State House and the General Assembly, and they also, let's see, you get free hunting and fishing licenses and some property tax exemption. And there's also some federal benefits because you're able to sell your crafts, under the Indian produced label, which is really good to have. And so we have recognized you and the other three tribes. I don't understand what can they show or prove. Now you told me that you traced your mom all the way back to the eugenics period, but that's not
Yeah.
good enough.
Well, here's the thing is that we have been recognized for 15 years. I mean, we went through a process of recognition with scholars and the legislators. The commission didn't have any decision on whether we were recognized or not. They could just provide a recommendation,
Right.
and that's why it went through a bill to get us recognized.
Ah,
So, the thing is about when they say we're using resources, ODNAC tries to scare the public that we're getting something that others are not. If you look in the bill, it's really our bill for recognition. It's a cultural recognition. It says right there that we're not allowed anything that other Vermont citizens can't have. So let's use hunting and fishing, for example. We get free hunting and fishing licenses through the state of Vermont. We follow all of the rules. We get an actual Vermont license. But there's 121,000 senior citizens right now eligible
right,
for free hunting and fishing.
right,
So that's not an issue. When
right.
it comes to tax exemption for our property, The Humane Society has 26 properties that are tax exempt. Churches have tax. So I
Right.
guess what I'm trying to say is they're trying to say we're getting something special that we're taking away from Vermont citizens and stuff, when in fact that we don't have, we're just in a category of getting things like other people would get, that has a law has been passed on. So their claims that we are somehow taking money from the public is a false narrative
And
that they're trying to push.
and why is that the business of people from Canada? I
Well,
mean, why are they worried about what we're doing here in Vermont? If we're okay with it, back
well,
off.
that's my point, is that if they want to talk about their history, their culture, they're just another tribe like the other four tribes. You know,
Right.
they're free. We're not we're not saying anything bad about them, that they can teach their culture, their history, their traditions. Where we have a problem is when they're trying to kill us off. And you want me to be honest with you, what
Yes.
disgusts me the most as a disabled veteran who protected this country, against foreign and domestic threats, that a representative would take the needs of a foreign entity and a foreign country over their own
Right.
constituents who are not even US citizens. So, and put them, like the latest bill that Rep. Hendrick had put in, is that he actually puts them, Odanak, in charge of Native affairs in Vermont, sitting on boards and commissions that are giving them reparations, wanting to send them money for harm that might at the state of Vermont have been done. That's Bill H.362 that's been put in the legislators, and it's in the General Affairs Committee. Obviously, nobody's taken it up yet, but
Right.
it's very disgusting that you might as well have Iran and China and Russia sitting in Vermont politics if you're going to let a foreign entity in a foreign country.
And what's his reasoning for that? Is I'm sure he's been
I
challenged.
I I don't know. He said that somehow they're victims. Like Odanak is somehow victims, that we're hurting them. And I'm like, dude, we don't even fish in the same pond.
Right. And
Like,
I think for some reason I've heard that they have quite a bit of money, right? I mean, they're not hurting for funds.
well, they just settled two land claims for $190 million.
Oh,
They have, Wolanak has a lithium mine and a casino. And Odanak just signed a 100 megawatt power deal with Hydro Quebec for the next 30 years to light up 28,000 homes. They are flush with cash. They have 90 people on their nonprofit. You know how many that works for Nulhegan full time? Me,
you. Yes, exactly.
me.
I know
So
that.
we can't compete with their media PR firms. We can't compete with them financially. All we can do is tell our history and our story,
Right.
and they're not even US citizens. They're not
Right.
even Vermont residents. So why are they
Right.
even allowed to influence Vermont politics? That's what befuddles me of any legislator that would do that. I almost consider them foreign agents, like they're working for a foreign government in a foreign
Yeah,
country.
this is strange. Obviously, you've spoken. Have you been able to speak at UVM at one of these sessions that they've had? Have you
No,
spoken? No.
they're put on. You have to understand, they're put on by the UVM professor for Odanak to give them a platform to come and defecate on us and try to remove our ethnicity. So it's you would think that they would understand after the eugenics, that 90 years later they would do the same mistake with trying to remove a entire race of people is just insane to me. But we are willing to teach about our history, our lived history, and our culture. There are some UVM professors that have stood by us and tried to do a support conference,
Yeah.
and but they have this big media campaign push, so all you're hearing is that their point of view. And like I said, I don't understand why a progressive who turned independent would even
Right.
entertain trying to do ethnocide when they apologized. The
And
state apologized for trying to harm us, and so did UVM.
yes, that's correct. I remember reading that after they had one of these symposiums, they actually apologized to UVM, that they had done some harm with that symposium. So
Yeah, but again, the
not really.
administration will come out against anti-Semitism, but they're kind of quiet. I mean, they're saying they don't agree with the professors who have academic freedom to do this, but they're not out there like they would for anti-Semitism. Like the president put out a statement to the public saying we don't agree with anti-Semitism, but when it comes to us, the administration have been very quiet about
Huh.
in the media, in the public, by
Right.
saying we don't support any attack on minority populations. It's not our job to decide who is and who isn't Indian. I mean, that's already been done.
Huh.
So I just hope the public understands that this isn't about culture, language, traditions, or identity theft. It's all about finances and resources and what they can get from Vermont based on old treaties before Vermont was a state. And they're trying to get recognized and try to get funding here. That's why they're going after the TRC to try to get
Mm-hmm.
reparations, because that's what that's set up for. They're going after us so they can try to do a potential land claim, which they have stated themselves. I'm not making this up. I mean,
No, I'm
you
with you.
know,
I understand. I'm very concerned every time I read something that gets me very upset. What does the Indian, what is the name, the committee that we have here in state government, the council for
yeah, the
for Indian Affairs?
yeah, the Vermont Commission on Native American Affairs.
Yeah, are
They're
they vocal? Do they stand up and
They
do?
are. They're saying that they represent all Native people in the state of Vermont, which includes Odanak citizens. If there are Odanak citizens living in the state of Vermont, they will try to meet their needs as well. But and they support the tribes and
Right,
all Native people in the state. That's their role. That's their job to
right,
facilitate that. But they their Odanak is in a foreign country and outside the jurisdiction of United States and Vermont. I mean, they don't really have a status here in Vermont or in the United States. So the commission doesn't, it'd be very hard for them to do anything in Vermont politics with Odanak when they're not even within the boundaries
right.
of Vermont.
Yep.
Um, except they're citizens. If they have citizens, of course, I mean, even their citizens testified on recognition, years ago.
Yeah, well, the history that I've read, that the Indians have moved through Vermont up to Canada, so some have stayed here and the rest have moved on, correct?
Well, yeah, I mean, you got to understand, we were all family bands. That's historically what we were, and we traveled from our winter grounds to our summer grounds. We moved between Canada and Vermont and New Hampshire and Maine and Mass. So selling our wares and visiting relatives and doing all those things. So we didn't use up all the resources. So, I mean, when you got to think of the French and Indian Wars, is that we were on the side of the French. And so that's where Odanak and Willanack are. So they always had reserves up there because the French provided it. But when the French and Indian Wars ended and Britain signed, the 45th parallel or whatever, guess what side we were on? We had fought against the British. So it's not like we were out, saying, hey,
Hey,
we're over here,
right,
come get us,
help.
because they weren't happy with us if we fought against them, right? And
Mm,
then, of course, many of us fought on the American side with the American Revolution.
right.
So, um,
Uh,
so we didn't have borders per se. We kind of we transcend those because that wasn't our thing until the Jay Treaty happened, I mean the Patriot Act, and then it stopped free passage between U.S. and Canada without an approved U.S. identification.
Interesting.
Before then, the Jay Treaty allowed free passage.
Oh, interesting. So, in November 2023, you wrote an opinion piece, which I thought was excellent, and it was entitled, "Why Can't We Celebrate Who We Are as a People?" Can you talk about the article? I think we've sort of covered some of it, and why you wrote it. This was not that long ago.
Yeah, I mean, when you're being attacked for who you are as a people, I mean, I have to be honest, nobody's going to go up to a black person and say, prove that you're from Africa, or,
Right.
oh, that's too far back, so that don't count anymore. I'm like, if you're going to claim that you're African American, you're going to show an ancestor that went back to
Right.
Africa. And for what I'm trying to say is that every other race of people have the right to identify and live their life in their community as they see fit without being questioned,
Right.
ridiculed. But so why is it different for us? Like why, the UN Declaration of Indigenous Rights allows us to self-identify. The US and Canada didn't adopt that, but we went through a process that's created by the federal government to recognize us legally as Abenaki Indigenous. So my point is that they have the authority to do that, but nobody else does. So why is UVM, why is Odanak or others trying
Right.
to decide? I mean, Odanak is trying to be the only authority on Abenaki people, when historically there were many bands, and that's like saying Montreal is in charge of French Canadian. I think Quebec would have an issue with that. So why does Odanak
Uh,
feel that they're the only authority on Abenaki people when that's not, they have their lived experience, we have ours. They're not the only authority. So if they're trying to say you're not real because you don't connect to them, well, that's their opinion, and that might be how they feel, but that's not historically accurate.
is it hard to track your lineage? Are the people not able to track back far enough, or because I can't imagine what records they had going way back?
Yeah,
Is it hard for the members of the tribes to track their lineage?
I think it's mixed because, like for Odinak's case, they are on a reserve. They have been on a reserve since the French and Indian Wars.
Right,
So whoever's attached to that reserve can say, "Oh, well, I'm part of this reserve."
right,
When you're down here in the States, you have an oral culture. You didn't write those things down. So the documentation that you have is based on Jesuits,
oh,
the church baptismals
right,
who called you savage until you were baptized, and then they gave you a name. You changed your name, like my grandmother was born as Lillian May. She got married as Pauline and died as Delia because she wanted to avoid the eugenics survey because she was in the survey. So she
ah,
kept changing her name. So how do you track that
right,
down, right? When you have people's names, but that's the good thing about the eugenics. It gave us some documentation on what they tracked us with, but for a bad reason. Without that, some of that is hard, because you can track your lineage, but
yeah,
it might say white, just like some Odanak people say white, because a lot of people mixed. And if you're being detrimented by being shown as Indian, you would want to give your kids the best chances you can. So, either you could put white, or maybe even the doctor looked at you and said, "Oh, you're white," and put down your race, because you might be illiterate or whatever. So, but we have plenty of documentation to show that we were recognized as Indian, doing our traditional, making baskets, selling them, traveling from place to place. In my case, even though they say I'm not either Indian enough or I'm not Indian, which has been proven to be false. Um, so I have those records,
hmm,
but some people aren't that fortunate when it's hard for them to find all of those.
right,
But our tribe and most tribes require that you can show connection to families that were indigenous, or be known as indigenous, or being part of that community. So and we had to provide that to the state. We had to provide some of that to the state, as part of the recognition process.
right. Now, why are they challenging the recognition process? I know Senator Keisha Ram Hinsdale, she's part of the supporting the Odanak. It sounded to me, maybe I'm wrong. If I'm wrong, I apologize. But I thought she was questioning the process here in Vermont, whether it was, and I know she was quoted saying, "What if we were wrong?" But
Yeah, well,
I mean,
I
how do
mean,
you prove that?
I don't want to get into personal things, but
Right.
she originally fought against our recognition in the beginning because
Uh,
she was friends with Tim Delabru, who was on the commission who represented Odanak,
uh,
and she was his best bud for a while, and they hung out together. And then when recognition started to get close, she came on board to help work with us
Oh, good.
to try to pass recognition.
Right.
And then now she apologized to them for harm that might have been done. So she
Oh,
kind of
good,
flips.
good.
She flips. Well, she apologized to Odenak, which is
Oh,
for
sorry.
harm being done. That's
Right.
but she flips back and forth. Now I, I don't want to speak for
No,
her.
no, please don't. I actually like her.
No,
She does a
but
great
I'm just
job.
saying is, her and Rep Hendrick has been really the only ones that have really
Right,
been involved from this, and she's entitled to support whoever she wants,
right,
but I don't think anybody has the right to decide who I am or who I am not, and that you can take my heritage away or my ethnicity because you think that I'm not something, or you think
right,
all we are is trying to live our culture, and we're trying to uplift our people. And I keep saying, if you really look at the facts, Nulhegan and the tribes down here are educating, we're preserving language, we're doing our culture. Odanak is down here only attacking. If they spent their money working on education and teaching about their culture, okay, great. But they're spending all their money and time to try to get rid of us, and there's a
yeah.
reason.
Well,
Um,
we were talking right before the show, before we started videotaping, that Middlebury College
yeah,
has a course on learning Abenaki, and there's like a waiting list. It's people want to take the courses and learn the language, which is certainly a statement in itself that Vermonters are certainly supportive. The people that I've spoken to don't understand it, why, and leave well enough alone.
well,
Be-
and again, it's nobody's authority to decide who we are.
That's true.
And second of all, if you have only 6 fluent speakers of the language at a certain time, and those elders are dying off, preserving language is tribal agnostic. So in other words, Odanak would speak the same language we do. They would have their dialect, but we would have ours. Like they would say
Right,
Abenaki, and we might say Abenaki or whatever. And so preserving the language has no bearing on what tribal affiliation you are. So we've even Odanak has had citizens in the language program actually learning the
huh.
language as well.
Wow.
And that's great. If we can preserve the language and move it forward, that's what we cared about. And Nulhegan is spearheading that language program. Jesse Bruchak is the
Oh,
director of
right.
Abenaki language, and he's a Nulhegan citizen.
And
We have,
I interviewed
yeah,
him on the radio. He was amazing.
yeah, he's awesome, and he
Yeah,
speaks our language fluently.
yeah, he
I
did.
don't,
He read a passage from something, and it just sounded so melodic and beautiful. I don't know what he was saying, but it was a beautiful language when you hear it spoken.
yes, it's very descriptive, and
Yeah,
we have a lot more of our citizens that are conversationalists now that can converse with each other in our language.
yeah.
And and that's what we're trying to do, is just uplifting our people and preserving the culture.
I read an article about what the Odanak's position. They listed all the different things that they're concerned about us. As you mentioned, I mean, they're Canadian citizens concerned about what's happening here in Vermont, and I just find that so egregious.
Yeah.
Just
And they
state,
can't, and it's not for resources, because they keep saying resources, because they get all theirs from Canada. We don't get
right?
anything from Canada.
Yeah, I
And we
mean,
get ours from here.
is it really just about land? And are they just to grow their land and their influence? Is that what's?
No, I think honestly, I mean, if people really dug into this, when they got reparations in Canada for the boarding schools and other things,
Oh, right.
part of that agreement was the provincial government would give royalties for anything coming across Indigenous land and that kind of thing. If you think about, they have a agreement with Hydro-Quebec on the 100 megawatt power deal, and that's owned by the provincial government of Canada,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
So in the 2022 symposium, when they came down here, the Beyond Borders thing, they had They had representatives from Hydro-Quebec here. They had the consulate of from Canada here that helped pay for some of that. They had the Assembly of First Nations chiefs here who handles anything that goes across tribal land. So why would those people be here just for an educational event on Odanak history, right? So like I said, our speculation is that since Hydro-Quebec put in 12 they bought 12 hydroelectric dams here, and they're trying to connect, Hydro-Quebec through the power line that comes down from Hydro-Quebec down the lake, remember, and cut
Yep.
into, right?
Right.
If they can prove that this is their property, then they might get royalties all the way up and down because it's owned by a Canadian company. So I think there's a lot going on other than just they're saying identity. I think it's got to do with if they can get reparations for land that was not ceded, as they say.
Yep.
Or there's other opportunities for building casinos here, or other ways for royalties for working with Hydro-Quebec or other things. Who knows? I mean,
Right.
I'm only speculating because based on what I know or what I've seen, but I can almost tell you it's our culture and identity has nothing to do in Canada.
Right.
We don't do anything in Canada, so we're not harming them in any way in Canada. The only reason they'd be having a fit down here is if they're trying to break into the United States and become recognized and deal with stuff. But we already have Abenaki tribes in Vermont,
Right.
and
We do.
so we stand in their way
So
because they want to be the only voice.
we have a reparations committee here in Vermont, put together by the General Assembly. Does that group ever discuss the Abenaki as being part of a potential reparation or not? Do you know?
Yeah, yeah. In the state of Vermont that created that bill,
Yeah.
the state of Vermont did an apology a couple years ago for the harm that the eugenics did,
Oh.
which, if you remember, the state of Vermont did the 1931 Sterilization Act, which formed the eugenics survey that UVM carried out. So UVM apologized for that program, and so did the state of Vermont. They created a resolution to apologize, which created the Truth and Reconciliation Commission to
Right.
say, how do we help with harm that was done through those programs? Now, if you really think the state of Vermont's going to give money, probably not. They probably might say, well, maybe we'll help with healthcare, maybe they'll help with, land or some other sort of thing. But I couldn't see that Vermont ever ponying up tons of money to help pay back
Right.
victims of eugenics. I think it's just a way of how do we document the stories, how do we move forward, and how do we work together to uplift community. I mean, that's my opinion.
Yeah.
But Odanak thinks that they're going to get reparations just like in Canada. So they're
Maybe
trying
not.
they're trying to get intertwined with the TRC, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, to say, because they've already said, if you're going to give money, give it to the real Indians, give it to us.
Wow.
And they've already said that they left before 1800, so they weren't even affected by eugenics. So they're just trying everything they can to get into the state, get into politics, get in, and their avenue is through UVM and media, the public media,
Right.
to try to get the legislators to change their position on us.
Well, they certainly have a propaganda machine cooking.
Yeah, well, they
So,
use a media firm
yeah.
called Seas, which is a highly successful media firm up in Canada, and they pay for the PR to come down and attack us. And I keep going back. They're using the same playbook, and I hate to say this, but they're using the same playbook Russia was using for Ukraine. First they said, well, we're only trying to get into the United States because it used to be ours. And then they switched it to, well, we have citizens living there, so we're trying to protect our citizens. And now they're just trying to kill us off. They're just trying to
And
remove us. So
how would that work, Don? I'm really serious. I mean, they all of a sudden Vermont would say you're no longer recognized.
if they, yeah,
How many?
well,
You
see,
have a lot of. How many people do you have as part of the tribes? How many thousands?
well, I think that, well, as I've testified in the past, there's probably 4,000 to 6,000 people
Yeah.
on tribal rolls in the United States on
Huh.
Abenaki tribal roll. So I'm not trying to minimize Ukraine or any. I'm just trying to give you an
Yeah,
example
right.
and I'm not trying to compare them to anything, but I'm just trying to say that they're whatever they come up with for an excuse of why they're attacking us, the ultimate goal is to remove us from our ethnicity legally, because they'll
Wow.
never remove us as a people, right? Because I mean,
Right. You are who you are.
right, but the government is the only one that can give you legal status. Like a federal government gives you federal recognition, a state gives you state recognition.
Right.
They're trying to remove the legal status so that way they can then say they're the only Abenaki around, and then they could go after Vermont. Right now, the Attorney General would use us to say, we have our own Abenaki people that are in the United States. You can't try to take land from Vermonters when we have Abenaki here, and you're in Canada, you have no standing.
Right.
And in Vermont, we don't even have the right to do a land claim. If you look at our recognition bill, we don't have the right to do a casino. We don't have the right to do a land claim.
Right.
So we're no threat to the state of Vermont. I mean, but I guess we're a threat to Odanak because they can't do anything down here.
Wait till Trump makes them the 51st state. Just kidding.
Geez.
Just kidding.
I,
That'd wake them
yeah.
up.
I'm just
Welcome.
saying that it's unfortunate that a state or feds have to tell you who you are, and that only relates to indigenous people. So they can take it away or give it whenever they want, because that's their right. They're the state and federal government.
Right.
So, like I said, that's why Odanak is pushing the legislators so hard to try to get rid of us, because they're the only ones that can get rid of us.
But when you look at, we're just talking now for the last half hour, there are so many things that have happened that we've done as a state. Well, the language courses, I mean, it's all in support of the tribes, the Abenaki tribes here. So we, as Vermonters, are supportive. We believe that you're recognized tribes.
Right.
I mean, what, are they fighting the whole state?
Well, they're trying to cut off our funds by killing our funders. They're trying to get people that work with us not to work with us. They're trying to get the state to remove our recognition. They're putting a lot of money and effort into trying to discredit or destroy us or remove us. And all we're doing is cultural work. Like all we're doing is uplifting our people. Now it's our culture. We're not claiming that we're following Odinak's customs and traditions and language. We're following our own
Right.
stuff that we have. So if they want to teach something else, let them teach something else. But like I said, it's a lot bigger than I think most people realize. It's it's just really sad that any legislator would take somebody else over their own constituents. I just don't understand how ethical how that even works, because you're elected to protect your constituents and help your constituents, but yet you're putting in bills to circumvent your own constituents for somebody else. So I don't even live in Vermont or live in this country.
Right.
Anyway, it's just really sad, and I don't understand it.
And they all vote, correct?
Yeah, and if they removed our recognition, how much that would unwind everything.
Right.
To try to, like, we don't even know what that would mean. Like how because we've integrated so much in language and culture and state park signs and in our land and all of these things, like how.
And if I may, your children.
Yeah.
Because when we went to that ceremony for the mural that's in the travel center here in Montpelier, that I think there were 8 artisans that put women that put that quilt together. All the kids, there were so many kids there, and they looked so proud of who they are, and they knew the dances and the songs. I mean, it's a whole new generation. What do you tell them? Just kidding.
Well, and that's the sad part about it, Pat, is that where they keep accusing, Odanak keeps accusing us of, oh, well, we didn't hide in plain sight. We were out. And I mean, if you look at how we're being treated now and being attacked viciously in the public and the media, why would you want to stand up and be questioned every day about your integrity? Do you think I like being called fake, or my integrity called in question every day, or my kids being upset because their father is being called, a fake Indian or not real or pretending or some, like, the kids, we have problems with kids getting beat up in school over this. We have We have people attacked at the UVM event, like the kids when they went and drummed that, people come up to them and say, you ought to be ashamed of yourself. You need to go home. We have our children that we want to be proud of who they are. And people were starting to come out to be proud of who they are. But if you're being attacked every day, do you think
Right.
you want to subject your children to that? I mean, so who's the real victim here? It's us. We're not doing anything. They're coming down here and attacking us. We're not
Right.
going up there and attacking them. They're coming down and causing this havoc on our people. And then they wonder why people go into hiding or wonder why people aren't out there. I mean, it's us people that are kind of idiot that will stand our ground and say, you're not going to eliminate us or erase us. We're Vermonters. We've been part of this fabric of Vermont for centuries, and you're not going to remove us because you might think we may or may not be who we are. We already showed the government who we are. We don't need to prove ourselves to Canada.
Right. And we have obviously supported you in many ways.
Right.
But some of the things we've just done.
Yeah. And continue to do.
Yeah.
I mean, we're still trying to work with the state of Vermont legislators. I mean, we're still trying to uplift and like we have a bill in right now that eventually maybe get taken up, maybe not now, that might allow state land to be used for agriculture. Right? I mean,
Right.
if you think about climate change with California on fire and the Midwest having droughts, New England's going to be the hub of the world, the country for food. If people keep migrating here and buying up all the agricultural land, how are we going to feed ourselves, right?
Right.
So we're asking, why don't some of the state land that could be used for agriculture be used for food security? I mean, obviously the cost of eggs, the cost of
Right.
vegetables and stuff. We should be looking at Vermont to work with people on indigenous ways of knowing to grow food here, so we're not as impacted by the national level of food prices or insecurity. So these are good things, right? We
Yeah.
need to
No,
get
great.
our kids back involved in growing tomatoes instead of playing on TikTok or
Well,
Facebook.
that food insecurity issue, I must bring it up at every show I do because here we are an agricultural state and we've got 1 in 4 food insufficiency in Vermont. What is that about? I
Yeah,
mean, we're supposed to know how to feed people
well,
and we're not doing a good job.
yeah, and USDA, that's why I keep saying we got to do it locally. USDA just announced and cut all the LFPA funding for school lunches and for food shelves.
Oh,
Uh,
really?
I don't know if you just saw that, but
I
that came
didn't.
out like 2 days ago. All of those programs have been cut for food for kids' meals,
Wow.
and also for food shelves. That's through the USDA. That was just put out. I now hopefully I don't know what Vermont's going to do about it. Like try to help still feed the kids, but
Right.
this national level is cutting all those programs, and so it's even going to get worse for food security. And us, Nulhegan, like I said, we're feeding just under 1,000 people a month in the community. We
Right.
have a food shelf in Holland. We have distribution hubs in central Vermont and lower Vermont, and even one in New Hampshire. We have a food shelf distributing meat, food. We have
Right.
a bison herd in Stoddard, New Hampshire.
Wow.
Um,
Oh, so we talked about that one. There are some Anak who are in New Hampshire and Maine. So
yeah, we
across,
have
yeah,
citizens. We have
part of the,
citizens throughout our Abenaki
yeah.
territory, and we try to support all of them.
Now, are they being attacked as well, or just Vermont? Because that's where
Well,
the majority of the people are.
well, since they're citizens of ours, they're being attacked because they're a
Oh,
citizen of our tribe.
right,
But are they being called out by name? No. They're calling out the leaders that are trying to make a difference, right? And the
yeah,
kids that are here in Vermont, because their focus is on really Vermont and New Hampshire, Odanak. They're they're
right,
they're concentrating on us because that's where the
yeah,
the old Phillips deed grant, the old Phillips grant, which is from 1796 or
right.
whatever, that covers New Hampshire and Vermont. And that's what they're going to use to try to claim the land here if they're successful at getting rid of us.
Well, I guess if we go far enough back, we find that the Allen family didn't do the Abenaki any favors, correct?
Yeah,
They,
correct. Well, you got to understand the Allens had a trading company, and back then the rules were is that any native land that you used, you had to compensate them for the use of it. So if they said no Indians were here, then they didn't have to pay any compensation.
ah,
So, and that's why they divvied up the land and said, well, they all moved, and which we
right,
have proven to be wrong,
right.
but they did it to avoid
Ah,
paying. Well, that's the story of what has always happened, right?
yep,
Use the resources so they don't have to pay anybody. And,
right.
that's the European mindset. This is my land for my hay, for my cows. And when I don't have enough, I'm taking yours, so it becomes mine. Um, and,
Great.
and with us, we look at how do we use everything in that space because we weren't owners, we were stewards. So
Right.
how do we protect everything in that space who use those resources? So we have the indigenous people have a lot to be able to give in that way of looking at the world, I think.
Well, do you have a champion, somebody that's really speaking for you as an Abenaki? Is there anybody here in Montpelier that's got the message and is trying to fight real hard back, push back?
Yeah, well, I think the tribes in the commission are really working
Good.
for the interests of the Abenaki here. When it comes to legislators, we do have a lot of friends that work in the legislators. It's been around, from the early times when Vince Aluzzi was, in the Senate doing
Yeah,
doing the recognition, and we have, some of those older legislators that really understand that they were trying to do a good thing and recognize us culturally to help uplift our people and to actually, do something good. Like
right,
and when they left office, they would remember that they helped, you know, protect an entire race of people, right? But I
right,
think some of the newer people they turn over every couple of years that they don't understand all of that history, all of the length of time that we took to fight
right.
to get recognition. That they may not understand that or really understand it. So that's the only detriment is that those people have to come up to speed by saying, look, this isn't right in any form of the imagination. And I'm trying to think too, from the legislator standpoint, what, where's the positive? If they kill us off, where's that positive? And if they keep us, then we're still moving the way we are. So if they got rid of us, what good does that do to the state?
Right,
Like what is that? How is that going to help the state? If anything, it's going to harm the state because now you're opening yourself up to, claims and other
right.
things. So where by taking up our elimination of our ethnicity, what benefit is that to Vermont or Vermont constituents when we're not really costing them anything? We're just educating and uplifting. So I just don't get why any legislator, again, it must be a lack of judgment, why they would try to kill off ethnicity or anybody's who they are.
Well,
Uh,
and you're right. If you substitute the people for other groups that I can name right now who are
yeah.
here, they go crazy and they
Oh
fight
yeah.
tooth and nail.
Well,
And
and I always go back to we're treated differently. Like if you were trying to portray a certain ethnicity, like say in a sports game, you would lose your job, right? But
right,
but you see people dressed up as Indians and all that, and then it's team spirit. Like what's wrong with you? It's team spirit.
right,
Where other ethnicities, it would be like, how dare you
right.
do this? So
Racist, blah blah.
right.
Yeah,
So my point being is that for some reason we're looked at differently than most ethnicities, and people feel they can decide who we are as a people instead of just letting us be who we are.
yeah.
Like, we just want to be who we are. We're not,
Well,
and continue to be proud of our culture and heritage.
yeah. And when you were talking about self-identification,
Yeah.
I want to get into this, but the gender issue these days. If I self-proclaim a gender, that's okay, and it is okay. But then how come it's not okay for your folks that say, I'm an Abenaki?
Yeah, and I think it should be okay.
Yes,
I mean, that's what we've done for years. The only difference here is whether we have legal status or not. My point being is that we had competent scholars and competent legislators 15 years ago who
yeah,
studied this.
yeah,
Then why do you need to come up with another process to look at our recognition on whether those legislators were competent or not?
Yep.
Or why 15 years later, why are we even talking about this anymore? Just because somebody in Canada thinks that we
Right.
shouldn't be who we are?
Well, our legislature, I just wrote something on Facebook the other day. I'm waiting to see how many people respond, but it's changed. We lost, as you said, a whole group of older
Yeah.
legislators who have the history, who have the culture, who respect the way things are in the State House. And we've got a new group of younger people who don't have that respect. And it's lost something up there. There's not the dress code that it used to be. When
Yeah.
you went to the State House, you're representing the people, so you dress appropriately. There's just so many things that have changed.
Well, and I also think the legislators, they used to be, this whole legislative system was designed for farmers,
Right,
because,
exactly.
that's why you had them come in January and leave by April or whatever, because that's when the slow times are for the farmers.
Right,
Now you have people that move here, and all of a sudden now they become legislators.
right.
And they're not familiar with Vermont. They try to, in some ways, they try to change it to where they left. And I'm not saying that's the case all the time, but
No.
some of the old time Vermonters who care about our traditions and our culture, and nobody's going to tell us, what to do in our state.
Yeah.
And if you're from another country or state, that wouldn't have even been thought about probably 20 years ago. That but now it's like, for anybody to entertain, like I said, I mean, Rep. Hedrick has only been there for 2 years,
Yeah,
right?
right, he's new.
I mean, and and he's a UVM professor that I don't know his history, but like, to even think that, if, like, I keep going back to it, to let a foreign entity in a foreign country decide what happens to your own constituents, it just, I don't even understand how a legislator would fathom that.
Right,
Because the old legislators would be like, we're Vermonters. We deal with Vermonters. We protect Vermonters. Now, we don't mind listening to others, but we're not going to do anything to harm Vermonters.
right.
And his bill is harming Vermonters and harming our people. So I don't even know what I can't even understand how that's even a thought process.
Yeah. Have you been able to talk to him just one-on-one?
Yeah, he
Or-
basically believes whatever he's being given by the people who are trying to
Right.
convince him to do. And like I said, I don't know what their motives and agendas are, but we're open to talk to any legislator who wants to talk about our history. Now, we're not interested in relitigating our who we are,
Right,
our status, our recognition.
done.
But if they want to learn about the Vermont Abenaki and who we are and our lived experience, I would sit down with any one of them and tell and show them or teach them, our lifestyle that's even recorded in the eugenics about us being Abenaki Indian or Indian gypsies, because they don't use the word Abenaki, they use
Yep,
Indian, right?
Indian,
But
right.
we're in our Western Abenaki territory, right? So I
Right.
mean, we lived here, so
Wow.
but anyway, we would educate them, and I don't know how many watch this show, but I want them to know that I'm willing to give them that education anytime, but not trying to debate who we are as a people, because that's just crazy.
Yeah, that's what we'll be putting this video in our newsletter at Campaign for Vermont. Plus, this will be shared with all of the other public access stations. So we get quite a few people looking at our videos, and this is an important one. So we will promote it as such, because people need to understand what's happening here.
Yeah.
And it's just, I'm sure they're Canadians, and I have Canadian friends, but Canada stays in Canada, and it's not going to be a state, and we're
Yeah.
Vermonters, so
Well, and again,
stay in your lane.
Yeah, and I keep going back, nothing says they can't teach about their history and their culture.
Right,
I mean, that's their lived experience. We have ours, they have theirs. But they don't have the right to try to destroy us or tell us who we're not,
right.
because that's not their place. That's not their authority.
Where is their main focus up in Canada? Is it on Ontario or Ottawa?
Well, it's
or-
up on the St. Lawrence. Up,
oh.
then there's I think it's Becancourt, how you pronounce it. So they're up past Montreal,
Oh,
up
okay.
on the right, almost across. They're up near Troy Rivers and
Oh,
those areas.
okay,
So
yeah.
I mean, up Montreal
Interesting.
all the way up through there. So even if they tried to claim Vermont, the Ganawage is in between them. So I don't even know how they could, I mean,
But
anyway.
they're a little far away from us.
Well, I think so.
And Don, we know that you mentioned Richard Whiting, who is he spoke at the State House on February 19th, and got folks cooking. Now, who is he? You mentioned him before. He's a UVM professor.
Well, I don't know if he's a professor. I know
Oh.
that I think he was, he studied under David Massell, who was the key driver of Odanak, this whole business with Odanak, because he does Indian and Canadian studies, right?
Yep.
Richard Whiting, I guess, David Massell had Richard Whiting in his class, and he did some research for that under eugenics and other things. But he doesn't have any credentials, like when it comes to being a certified genealogist or any of that stuff. I mean, he just did research, and yeah, he might have studied, some of the eugenics, because that happened at UVM, but so didn't
Right.
Nancy Gallagher, and so did Mercedes, who did the books on Breeding Better Vermonters and also the Vermont Eugenics Program. So he's playing with words. He's saying there was no Abenaki in the eugenics that got targeted. Well, they didn't use the word Abenaki, they used the word Indian, right?
Right.
And if 436 of my family members were targeted in the eugenics who were shown as Indian and gypsies, we weren't all imbeciles and
I don't think so.
diseased
Right.
people. When you're and in the newspaper accounts, it shows there's 75 of us that were traveling from place to place in 35 teams of horses. That's a logistical feat to move that many people from one
Right.
place to another.
Right.
So, okay, you want to play semantics? Does it say Abenaki or doesn't it? It doesn't say the word Abenaki, but it's implied, and it says Indian, and
Right.
it says we were here in our Western Abenaki territory,
And we're still here.
living our traditional ways and
Right.
doing things. So if he wants to say there was no Abenaki affected because they're not listed, but there were families listed. That's what we keep
Oh,
saying.
well, there you go.
Including my grandmother.
Oh, excellent.
So,
So Don, we're running out of time,
Yep.
and I just wanted you to give folks, our viewers, a website or something so that they can, if there is a website for the Abenaki, for the Nulhegans, what's happening, and they can maybe learn a little bit more about the people.
yeah, I think there's two that would be very good. If they went to AbenakiAlliance.org, AbenakiAlliance.org,
Yep.
that gives some of the issue of what's happening around this subject, some of the resources. They can get to the tribal websites through that, and it gives up, other opinions, legal opinions that we went through a process. I think AbenakiAlliance.org is a good place, or they could always go to Nulhegan, our website, and that's AbenakiTribe.org.
Great.
And they can find out about all our programs, services, education. If they're looking for the educational pieces, I think going to our website. But if they want to learn about other tribes
That's
and what
great.
they're doing, and also the situation, I think AbenakiAlliance.org is a good place.
Don, thank you so much for being on the show. We're going to get this distributed as widely as we can, and I wish you a lot of luck. So
Thank you,
yeah.
and I appreciate the support that you are providing,
Well.
and to get our voices out, and we're here, like I said, not to take anything, but to educate and uplift a community
Great.
that's been disadvantaged. So I appreciate this.
Thank
And
you.
I extend to come on anytime you'd like, or educate anybody who would like to know about
Thank
the
you.
Abenaki experience in Vermont.
Thank you. Chief Don Stevens, thank you very much. I'm glad we're friends. It's been a pleasure. Thank you. This is Pat McDonald, your host for Vote for Vermont, where our tagline is listening beyond the sound bites. See you next week. Thanks for listening.